Yes, This song is called Be the Change, inspired by the words of Mahatma Gandhi, who lived for peace and not violence, and told us to be the change we wish to see in the world.
Welcome to the 100th Monkey Radio Show with Tom and Ramon, and we have an amazing show for you this week, and I want to thank everybody for supporting us. Those members, especially the members, and even the non-members. Hopefully one day you will become a member. But there's so many things I've been looking here in the news, and some of the news has got me excited. So might as well jump into that. Tom, you want to add something?
I want to go straight to that news article you posted. Should Palestine switch from shekel to Bitcoin? What's that all about, Ramon?
Well, that one I was reading into it, and pretty much the way some people are looking at it is, it doesn't really say if the Palestinian people are really looking at it themselves, but I can see why that question was brought up, because the thing is, for those of you who are not aware of Bitcoin, it's pretty much an algorithm currency. It's basically, let's say you have a rig, computer system, and you get this program, and what it does, it figures out these algorithms, and each coin that it develops, a new algorithm comes up that's even more difficult and takes your computer longer. And I've been reading into it a lot, and they've done, the way it's done, it's kind of hard to fake it or mimic it. And the more important thing is that you completely sideswipe the banking system. You decentralize the currency, because if I want to send you some money, Tom, it doesn't matter how much I want to send you, I can just go, send it person to person. I don't have to go to like Western Union
and you don't have to fill out forms when it's over $5,000 or whatever the heck it is,
Exactly. So, with that whole thing that happened in Cyprus, a lot of people just dumped their money into it instead of like losing their money or bringing it back to their own country and paying lots of taxes on it. They just did that. Another news, let's stay on Bitcoin for a second here. The central banks are looking at Bitcoin, and they're really shaken about it. They're trying to, the American, I forgot who was it exactly. I think it was the Federal Reserve, don't quote me on that. They were looking into the Bitcoin because now it's making them nervous, because you have some companies that are dumping money into their system to set up a Bitcoin and stuff like that. So it's starting to take off as far as the Bitcoin. There's other
it's definitely gaining ground, and the alternative media genre out there that has been talking about this stuff has really grown legs, so to say. And I got people at work that have actually brought up Bitcoins, and that's coming from left field. These guys, in the box type people that I never would have dreamt would be coming up with this stuff, talking about this stuff. So it's definitely another viable alternative. There's a few of them out there, and something's got to change with the way that things are done on this planet, and it's coming soon. there is a change in the air. So
Yeah, definitely.
whether
Well,
it's whether
speaking of
yeah,
change,
whether it's Bitcoin or something else, time will tell.
yeah. Speaking of change, here's one. Monsanto found of chemical poisoning landmark case in France, and they were found guilty. So yay! That's really exciting for me. Let's see, Vermont could be the first U.S. state to mandate GMO food labeling, which it really doesn't make any sense and starts to show the real corruption of what's going on because here you have the what was the ex vice president of Monsanto, now he's the top guy at the FDA, and it's like, okay, if you want to slap us a little harder in the face with
Yeah,
reality,
little conflict of interest there, maybe.
you think.
Yeah.
And the other one is, so there's a few Monsanto things here. For those of you who are not aware, there was about 400 countries that marched against Monsanto. So, things are really waking up. Even though CNN and those top guys didn't mention it, I didn't find anything on it.
Yeah, I didn't either. I looked the other day.
Yeah, it was surprising, right?
Yeah, it didn't surprise me at all. Just like that 2 million man march that happened a couple of years ago that never made any news either.
Yeah, but the great thing about alternative news, not only our site, but it's so many different people, and I have to give big kudos to Russia Today, because I've been getting a lot of the news from there, and at least they're covering it. And people, even inside the box, people are really getting tired because the BS is so obvious.
Right.
It's not even like, is it? I'm not sure. It's like so obvious to even the blind. No offense to our blind listeners. Let's see. One more thing. Another one is Native Americans quit talks over the Keystone XL pipeline. I believe that's in the Dakotas. And, they just like walked away because what they were trying to discuss, I guess the U.S. government wasn't really trying to help them. They're trying to lay these pipelines, and they're worried about the environmental consequences. Which 100 and something years later, we're still using oil. I don't get it.
Right.
That's another obvious.
Yeah, well, like I said, with changes in the air, Ramon, we've got a lot of things that are happening in the world. And before we get into our guest, which is actually he's all about change. He's going to tell us what's coming up and show us some of the science behind it, actually. But before we go there, you guys can catch us on Facebook, Twitter, Vimeo, YouTube, www.the100thmonkeyradio.com, and what am I missing, Ramon? Is that it? Oh yeah, and then our Truth Frequency show on Saturday nights, our live show.
Yeah, I just want to mention one last thing. I'll post a YouTube video on the website. I have it on the Facebook page, but it's a family who basically does urban gardening. They have about, I think it's a quarter of an acre. It's really small, and they have a full garden. They have 2 goats, 4 chickens, 2 ducks, and they grow all their own vegetables. They spend like $12 a month on electricity. They sell the extra vegetables to restaurants that want to do only organic, which again, it's another thing that we can do. I have a very, Tom has a little more space, so his garden's bigger, but I live in Japan, so I have a much smaller space. But, you can do it yourself.
Yep.
For those of you who have don't have the green thumb, it takes a little time.
Yeah, something else that I just noticed here actually this weekend, Ramon. I signed up on Meetup.com years ago, and I periodically get emails from them that are showing local groups that are starting up. And I noticed that there's quite a few different groups that are centered around farming, urban farming, and that's kind of I mean, there's a sign of the sign of the times right there. Things are changing. People are starting to think about growing their own food, which is awesome stuff. So
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, Monsanto and those companies that deal with Monsanto are really hurting themselves because you're pushing us to, stop buying your products.
okay, well
So, what do we have?
let's get to our guest tonight. Tonight we have Jeff Harman. He's an astrologer, and he has been an astrologer for more than 3 decades, utilizing a variety of systems, including traditional or classic Western astrology, Vedic Astrology, Kabbalistic Astrology, Astro-Location Astrology. Jeff spent 10 years in Beverly Hills and has a remarkable client base and data bank of thousands of case studies. Jeff has spoken for ForIONS, MUFON, the Joshua Tree Retreat Center, and the Association of Celebrity Personal Assistants. He's been a guest on Coast to Coast and Veritas and probably too many other radio and TV and web shows to name. His website is www.jeffharman.com, and I would like to give you a warm 100th Monkey welcome to the show.
Well, thank you, Tom.
So,
all right, and Ramon, yeah.
So Jeff, what really intrigues me? Well, actually, probably for our listeners who are not familiar with you, I'd like maybe a little bit of background. What actually sparked your interest in astrology in the first place?
Yeah, that's a good question, because you and I were talking about that before the show, and it actually started out. My mother was an astrologer, and when I was a kid, I was really interested in science and the linear aspects of life. And in the 60s, I started seeing my mother have documents sitting around about medical astrology. It was actually medieval medical astrology, and where you actually can diagnose energetic imbalances, very similar to Ayurvedic and also some of the disciplines in Chinese medicine, where you would look at a person's imbalances and then try and correct that, either through some type of herb or dietary practice. And I didn't think much of it. And then in the 70s, how she got my attention was she would begin to tell me about girlfriends that I'd go out with. And she wasn't just kind of accurate. She would absolutely be explicit. And I'd go, there's no way you could know this by, mother's intuition. I said, what are you doing here? So that's when, and you and I were mentioning about how back then it was BC, before computers. We busted out the ephemeruses and cast the chart. And I was really amazed. And it wasn't probably until, I would say, the late 70s, early 80s, when I started to really get the feel of it, because it's complex. And then in the mid-80s, I was really hard into science. I was into physics, into electronics. In fact, I was actually teaching at a college physics of sound and electronics and so on and so forth to teachers for continuing education units, and then I was at a small technical school connected with learning sound engineering and audiovisual production. And what was interesting was the parallel of looking at science and then looking at this quote-unquote mystical science. And I would always be fascinated, because I had a studio at the time, and we would be doing a lot of commercial work and industrial film work for a lot of companies back in the Midwest. And I would wonder why certain people would have a college graduate from Berklee College of Music, and they were very astute and organized, and the next guy would be, an alcoholic or, some kind of chemical dependency, because they were just all over the place being musicians. And I got to do a lot of charts, and I just was amazed at how accurate it was. But where it really got fascinating was probably in the, I'd say, late 80s. There was a document that broke the scenes, and it's kind of what we call the revival of ancient astrology. It happened, it's put up by Regulus. There was an English astrologer who was a court astrologer for England back in the 1600s, and he published this originally in 1647, And why the book has such significance is because it was one of the few books in English, not Latin or, Arabic or Hebrew or something else. It was people in the United States who could get access to it. It was actually published, I think, in 1985. Yeah, so I think I got it right about then. It was somewhere around that area. And a lot of modern astrologers may have heard of him. He's William Lilly, and he's kind of the traditionalist that can be thanked for reviving all this. And since then, since the 90s in particular, the last decade, oh my God, there's been translations coming out all over the place, from Egypt, from Greece, from Arabia. The House of Wisdom was a place in Baghdad. I don't know if it was right in Baghdad. I think it was in Basra, Iraq, where all these ancient people got together and decided to create a house of wisdom because they wanted to solidify this knowledge so it didn't get lost. This is back probably in the 600 to 800 AD area, or CE, whichever you want to refer. And the fascinating thing was they put together this huge body of knowledge. A lot of it was from Egypt and Hellenistic Greece and Hellenistic Egypt. And it was basically the foundation for the entire corpus of the medieval astrology that later came in the Middle Ages and was so prolific with many of the kingdoms. In fact, court astrologers were revered at one time. They would literally trade them around from kingdom to kingdom because the king wanted to know if he went to war or did coronations or started something that it was going to be done at a good time. So, and it wasn't superstitious. It was actually really, in fact, Washington, D.C., I can tell you for a fact, it's not a theory, I know, that is to this day uses astrology a lot. I know. Right. I have clients in Washington, D.C. myself, and I can't mention who they are or what positions they're in, but some of them are in some pretty high places. And it's interesting you guys mentioned the money. Several in banking, in very high levels of banking, and they're concerned too about where the money's all going. And J.P. Morgan might have said it best: millionaires don't use astrology, billionaires do, and they use the old stuff. The old stuff is better not because it's old; it's better because it uses a very scientific approach, where astronomy and astrology were one. Today, they're totally separate.
Right. Right. Yeah, it's and we mentioned this a little bit off the air too, but the tabloid or the newspaper astrology is so woo-woo, is so fluffy.
It is. Yeah.
Everybody has a good day in those.
Yeah, that's why we call it love, light, and cluelessness, right? Right.
Yeah, and
love and light, okay.
Yeah, from what I've seen, when you really start digging into astrology and the depth of it is, oh my God, it's the bottomless pit as far as how much you want to actually know about something it just baffles my mind. Like I told you, back in the early '80s, I started digging into it myself, and it was just a bit overwhelming for me at that time in my life, and pre-BC, like we said, before computers. So it was everything was all done by hand, and I had my chart done by somebody else, and was just totally amazed, absolutely amazed by how accurate this stuff was. But it was still a little on the fluffy side, even back then, when it was done by hand. And I heard you talk about, you mentioned some of this stuff that's been surfacing from the ancient times, and that's really piqued my interest in you and your material in particular because of, I don't know, I feel like the wisdom of old has so much more substance to it than what we have in our modern day.
I agree with that. The other area that I was really blessed to get exposed in was Vedic astrology. Now, Vedic astrology is kind of the popularized term. Its real ancient name was called Jyotisha. Jyotisha means the science of the light of the soul. And why I like this stuff and some of the really ancient astrology is because today, everyone will run around and say, oh, I'm a Gemini, or I'm a Cancer, or I'm a Libra, or whatever. And I always cringe when I hear that, because I go, no, you're not. You're a soul having a physical experience. The sun sign that they told you you were is not you. It's just when you entered into the script. Shakespeare might have said it best. He said that, you know, life is all a play and we're the actors on the stage. And I think the astrology is the script. But what's even more interesting about the ancient stuff, like you're just mentioning, is the more you dig into it, if you get into the ancient shastras and scriptures, be east or west, and the Tibetan stuff as well, some of the Asian stuff's amazing as well, where it basically talks about the astrology is a script you wrote, or we wrote collectively. And I think humanity writes the script collectively as a civilization, but then we each write our own individual as well. And that's what's amazing. And Jyotish astrology is pretty astounding. I have to say, I've never seen anything quite as accurate as it. I mean, it has nailed throughout my life. I've always had health issues, and thank God of my mother, she told me, she goes, you know, you're probably always going to have that, where you get really like chronic fatigue, but they'll never figure it out. And the astrology explained why. And I have to tell you, I've never seen anything nail it down as accurately. And when changes happen, it's absolutely profound. The Upanishads, they speak, what they do is they speak about how we are incarnate and that we have like 5 layers to our soul, and that the present personality of consciousness, that it's the thinking mind we think we know everything with, basically connected to the 5 senses, is where the seat of astrology seems to interact. However, that's not us. It's only the present personality. And, you know, when you guys were mentioning before some really good stuff, when you opened the show, you guys were talking about, you know, the world, where it's at, the Bitcoin and Monsanto, and, you know, all of us can feel collectively the walls closing in on the very systems humanity created to survive. And the financial systems are, you know, coiling around us like a cobra right now, and we're all just waiting to see when it's going to restrict. And it's interesting because astrology, using the ancient stuff, shows how the collective stuff on humanity in general is happening. And I can tell you, we're in the throes. I actually have a newsletter on my website about this. If you go to the jeffharman.com when you get time, you can actually see at the bottom it says current newsletter, and it's basically about the cycles we're in. We are in a Uranus-Pluto square right now, which is revolutionary. And I can tell you, this November through April, I would be very surprised if we don't see some near cataclysmic stuff, earth change-wise. I mean, you know, everybody can see the weather's off the charts. I mean, it's the latest spring we've had in a long time, severe weather patterns all over the globe. I mean, we just had snow in, where was it, New England yesterday?
Right.
I mean, kind of unheard of, you know, on the brink of June, though it has happened before. But and granted, we've had tornadoes this severe in the past, but I think we're going to see a lot more frequency of strange hurricanes, tornadoes, earthquakes, and phenomena. And NASA has said, yes, we are in a solar cycle right now, solar maximus. That's affecting us. But this Uranus-Pluto we have the biggest one coming up this November. It's an alignment that's exceedingly powerful because we have a heliocentric, which is a solar system square, and it also geocentrically squares the Earth. So plain English is that's really likely to precipitate some serious stuff. The big one, though, is 2020. And in fact, we were mentioning Mel Fabregas, and I talked about that, I think it was last fall. He said to me on the radio, on the air, he says, what do you think is going to happen on the Mayan calendar ending? I said, not much. And the reason why is I couldn't find anything that astrologically synchronized in a major way with the Mayan calendar. But what does is 2020. The reason why the ancient Egyptians and the Vedantic astrologers used cycles of Jupiter and Saturn. And we know Jupiter and Saturn conjoins every 20 years, but it doesn't conjoin in certain configurations for almost every 1,000 years, and that's in the very first term of Aries. That's when the Industrial Revolution happened in the 1700s, even though we know it got going a little later, but that's when it really started. And, of course, the New World, the modern, and in fact, we were mentioning earlier, astrology fell out of grace then, and religious kind of, zealotism took over in a lot of ways. And it was the age of reason, the age of science, and, as you pointed out, it's maybe not so reasonable. It's caused a lot of wars and trouble and incarceration. Anyways, the next what we call mutation conjunction, which happens about every 240-something years, is precisely on the winter solstice of 2020. And I would bet that this November through April is going to precipitate some gargantuan changes. This series that we're in, the Uranus-Pluto, doesn't complete until March 17th of 2015, which is just 5 years before the big chapter that changes. It's called the Mutation Conjunction. The real big chapter in civilization should be in place or happening by or about 2020 is what I get.
Right. I always did feel like our clock was not quite set right. As far as looking out at all these different prophecies that have been laid down throughout the ages, and the way that we overlaid the Gregorian calendar onto all of these things and trying to match them up. I just always felt that there was something that just didn't quite mesh, like the age of Aquarius. I just don't feel like we're there yet.
About 300 years from now, if the calculations are right.
Yeah.
About 340 years almost.
Yeah. So I mean, it's a 2,500 year cycle, right? Or what is it? What is it?
26,000 year cycle.
Well, it's a 2,125 years. Is that what it is for each segment?
That's right, per sign, right?
Yeah.
That's called precession of the equinoxes, right? And that's disputable because, Tom, we don't know. I mean, I can tell you it's not linear. In fact, there's theories that we catapult around a binary system. It's a central sun called Alcyon,
right,
which is in the Pleiades, but they think there's a dark dwarf with it, and that we may catapult. So it's not a linear time frame per sign.
Right.
But you're right. It's
like
about 21.
We'd like our time would speed up, or the precession would speed up as we neared that star and went around it, and then slow down when we get farther away from it.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then there's Orphica, which is the 13th sign. It's fascinating, these zodiacs, because astronomers just laugh at astrologers. They basically will say that none of the zodiacs in astrology match up with astronomy, and they're right, they don't. And the other thing that I find astounding is in the Vedic astrology, they use a lunar zodiac. And I always joke around with my astronomer friends, and I say, I don't care how much you polish the lens on your telescope, you're not going to see this one. It's around the moon. And what's fascinating is it's believed that the soul passes through the last astral sphere of the moon prior to being tied into the body at first breath and incarnation. And I think they're right, because they're called the 27 Vedic nakshatras, or you could say lunar nakshatras, which are mansions. And then there's, interestingly enough, 4 divisions to that, which equals 108. And the moon just happens to orbit the Earth 108 times in 9 sol lunar years, not Gregorian calendar years. So it's interesting, the math. 1 + 8 is 9, the numerology, and then, of course, the the lunar mansions. And this is one element of Jyotish astrology that's astounding, because, like, I was looking at your charts. You guys gave me your charts. And Thomas, you're in what we call a Rahu Dasha, which means time period. And it's good. It's good. It's in the second house. You moved into that in 1996. You're going to stay in that until 2014. Actually, if your birth time's correct, it'll be around September 17th of 2014. You will change for the first time in 18 years a major, what we call Dasha. And Ramon, you're in a Mercury period. You just moved into that back in 2002, and you'll remain into the Mercury Dasha until 2019. So, I mean, only you two can answer what happened, but generally speaking, there's some major shifts. It's really fascinating, because this gets into some of my favorite stuff really quickly, where we know the planets are real, and we know that, you know, they orbit the sun and all that. But from these ancient philosophies, they say this is truly a matrix. It's an astral, spiritual matrix. And yes, you have the physical planets, and their physical movements affect us and all that. But what they're saying is, in an astral sense, they're literally what we call seizers or graspers of the aura. In fact, there's a word in the Jyotish scriptures in Sanskrit called graha, and that's exactly what they call planet. It's called a graha. And when you look it up, Graha, it actually means seizer or grasper of the aura. And when people's dashas change and their subperiods change, they really feel a shift. I don't know if you guys felt, respectively, any shift at those times. But
1996 was a huge year of change for me. I mean, tremendous change. I changed from I was a carpenter for 20 years, and ended up, I went up and did the deep sea fishing thing, the deadliest catch thing up in Alaska. And hurt my back, which in turn created a situation where I had to completely change careers. So 20 years in one career, and then boom, into another career. I got married that year. I mean, that was a big year of change for me.
I'll bet. And, you know, that house you grew up in was pretty intense, wasn't it?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
I know you got your house of family looks like mine. It was kind of like Krakatoa,
yeah.
Now, see, what's interesting is, you know, when I do readings for people, they'll say to me, "Oh, how did you know that?" Well, this is a language, and, you know, scientists can scoff at it all they want, but I've just seen it time and time again. In fact, I have a lot of clients these days, believe it or not, from psychology and psychiatry, because psychologists and psychiatrists are beginning to acknowledge that, you know, science doesn't have all the answers. And I'm not saying anything does, but what I am saying is this is something I find psychologists and psychiatrists are very interested, particularly in Vedic astrology, because it really helps one understand why you're experiencing or getting what you're getting. And to me, that's not superstition. It's not predicting the future. It's predicting probable outcomes based on current states of consciousness. Right. Guess what? If you change your consciousness, you will change your outcome. So to the people who get real, you know, uppity about the religions, I always say, hey, wait a minute. Half the leaders of religion study this stuff assiduously. They busted more popes back in the Middle Ages studying the deep, profound Egyptian and Arabic astrology. And in fact, one of the guys I love to quote, he's in commentary all over the Bible. All over the Bible. You can prove this. Anytime you want, go look up your Psalms or anywhere in particularly the Old Testament and the Psalms, and you will see Izra, I-Z-R-A, or you'll even see Ibn Izra, I-B-N space Izra. That's Rabbi Ibn Izra. Right. He was one of the most prolific electional and interrogational astrologers. He was literally moved in the 1100s from England to France, over to Italy. He was cherished because the kings wanted him for coronation times, or if they were, having any military things, they would want him to cast something called interrogations. Interrogations are also known in the West as horary, which means it's just asking a question. Because even today I run into it all the time. I don't know what time I was born. It's not on my birth certificate. Okay, fine. We don't need that. We don't need your birth chart. So what you do is, if you cast a chart, and this is probably one of the best tools I use every single day, someone will call me up and say, hey, our bank's going to move funds from this point to that point. Is it in our best interest, or should we use Bank B? Well, I don't know. Let me cast a chart. I'm not using the guy's birth chart. I cast a chart for the moment in time they pose the question. The querent becomes the eastern horizon. The planet ruling it is his consciousness. The second house is his resources, which is his money. And the seventh house is the would-be person you're looking at doing business with, marrying, sending money to, making a loan or getting a loan from, or whatever it is. And the government or the judge, I do this all the time in trials too. Oh, we're going to go sue somebody. You think we'll win? Well, I don't know. Let me cast a chart. Cast the chart. The judge is the 10th house. Your opponent is the 7th. And if your opponent's stronger than you and the judge favors that opponent more, you're going to lose. It usually comes out that way. And it's not predicting, it always comes out that way. It's not predicting the future. It's based on current states of consciousness. It's almost like vectors. If you have certain conscious vectors placed, it's like two bodies going down a highway. If they're never going to meet, well, there's not a problem. If they're going to collide, well, if one doesn't hit the brakes or turn or do something, that's the event you're going to get. But if you see that, and you say, oh, well, we've got a collision going on here. Let's hit the brakes. Let's turn. Let's do something. You now avoid the event. And that's why it isn't predicting the future, but it seems like it because most people don't change their consciousness.
So this is sounding like the astrological effects, the cosmos effects are more, have a kind of a linear type landscape, and we are the mutable element within it.
Well, that's well put. Yeah, I never thought of it quite like that, but yeah, that's another way of saying it. Yeah, that's right. I think the biggest power a human being has is their ability to react appropriately.
Yeah, it's so funny you mentioned that, because I was writing something about that yesterday, about the reactions to different things. Like, for example, someone said something offensive. But going back to 2002 with my chart, that was the first time ever I traveled abroad, and it was the first time that year I went to. I live in Japan now, but I came to Japan, and I came here like with $800 in my pocket and not knowing where the hell I was going. So it's quite an amazing year for me.
Yeah, life has changed for you since then. You've been in a Mercury period, which is really quite good. It's way better than it was. Yep.
Nah.
What's interesting is if you go back through people's lives, and what I always do in sessions is show people this data. I'm not there to teach them astrology unless they want me to, but I like to get people to see, rather than just this vague generality, oh, things are going to be good for you. I literally say, look at here, these dates are trigger dates. And I give people their whole life path. And they start looking back and go, oh, my God, that's when I was 7 years old or 6 or whatever it was. And I was in this, and invariably it's right on. And here's the thing, people will often say, wow, Jeff, you're just amazing. I say, no, I'm not. The astrology is. I just learned how to do it. Thanks for the compliment. But if anybody wants to work hard, and it's taken years to learn this, only because it's actually more exciting now, I think, to learn astrology because the tools are more powerful. I always like to tell this story. One of the guys I studied with in Vedic Astrology, we used to sit in the ashram. What he would do is he would say to me, oh, Jeff, you must always cast chart by hand, right? You must always, make sure you use the chart by hand. And then I think it was in the 90s, late 90s, I showed up with the first Vedic astrology program that was put out that actually did all the calculations, because we took it took us half an hour just to get a chart and all the dashas calculated. And he saw this and, oh my God, he goes, I want to get a copy. I says, no, grasshopper, you must always calculate chart by hand. He says, no, I want a computer. I said, I agree. So that's what I mean. It's more fun today because you can focus on the art of interpretation rather than calculation. But you do need to know, because computers are stupid, and you do have to set up the programs correctly, which does take a lot of time. But if you do that, and you know how to, what you're looking at, and you know the basic fundamentals, it's amazing. I mean, in seconds, I can look at stuff that used to take me forever to calculate.
Right.
But yeah, I see. Like Tom, you had from 1989. You were in a Mars period. I mean, it was intense then. Were you in a relationship? From 89 forward, you were in a Mars Mahadasha for 7 years, up until 1996. So if you were in a relationship, whether it was a formal marriage or just one you were living, it would have went kaboom during that period.
It did. It did at the beginning of that, actually. Yeah, that was my quote unquote wake up process spiritually began in like in 86, 87, and it really intensified in 89. And that's 89 was when I got the big 2x4 upside the head because I wasn't paying attention to what was going on.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's a powerful time for you. It's actually quite powerful. Yeah, you've got. I could see where you'd probably be you'd be good with your hands. I bet you can make a lot of stuff. You've got a very good chart for being able to design things and create things. You'd be a good writer too. Yeah, smart.
Be a good writer. Yeah.
I'll bet. And what's interesting is if you research this stuff, there's an older astrology called Nadi. Nadi is spelled N-A-D-I, and in my opinion, it's probably the most sacred and profound stuff. The British found this stuff during the Salt Wars with Gandhi, when they took over India, and Gandhi defeated them basically through nonviolence. And it was interesting is they found all these Nadi palm leaves in the temples in southern India, and they basically didn't find any military significance, so they didn't care. But they were intrigued because it basically would take all the souls that are born during these particular months and times, and it would show you what the path and the karmas were. Well, there's also another system called Nadi Astrology, and this to me is really fascinating because you can actually see throughout your life with that system of progressions. It does astrology like I've never seen anybody do astrology. I mean, it's just fascinating to me, and it's something I constantly study because I'm just blown away with the way the solar system matrix needs every soul, if you will, like bread. It needs it in a way that's specific to you or to me or to anyone else. And it's very divine. Only a God could create that. And, not to offend the atheists, but I mean, I have to tell you, in my opinion, there's overwhelming evidence that this is sacred, holy stuff, and that you're a spiritual being having a physical experience. And it talks about the more we can get conscious while living incarnate, rooted to the earth in this body, the better we're going to do when we, quote unquote, as man calls it, die. Because we don't die. We just move on. And there's these lower astral dimensions it talks about where your consciousness doesn't really appear to grow as easy. It still can grow, but not as easy as it can here, because you're more rooted into this pseudo perception of reality, even though it's kind of square boxed. That's why science has such a hard time fitting everything into a three-dimensional 5-sense reference point. When you can't put infinity into that,
right.
It's that's why quantum physics and the theory of relativity and so many of these other references attempt to do so, but it's hard, and it's fascinating to study these principles in Jyotish and in Kabbalah that are almost exactly one and the same, just change the names. And it's talking about how we're going to keep going back to this barbecue, which is, of course, incarnations, until we start to become consciously self-aware. And I really think that was the goal of all the saints, the prophets, the rabbis, the Tibetan lamas. You pick the religion, pick the culture. That's what the true masters were talking about, is how to escape from Alcatraz and get out of your astrology. But interestingly enough, they would look at the astrology in order to figure out how to get out of it.
It's a roadmap, right?
It is.
Yeah, and once you reach that point, do you think those beings that reach that point are no longer subject to the influences of the stars?
Yes, I think your consciousness is the key. There's been an old thing in the Kabbalah, and I don't mean to offend anyone in religions, there's evidence that way back, before we called Egypt, and the Middle East, and the Holy Land, that there was this ancient sacred wisdom. And it seems, we've heard, of Pythagoras going to Egypt, and on the papyrus scrolls, he was told by an Egyptian priest that there was Atlantis. But I think there's a lot more lore to that, or truth to that, than just lore, because what you see, particularly in some of the ancient texts of India and in the Kabbalah, is the focus on how to become consciously self-aware so that fate doesn't affect you. And people will say, well, okay, that's what the religions try to achieve. They did. But the problem is they create a religion, and I'm not out to attack religions because there's some of them that are very good, but they always draw these lines. George Carlin might have said it best. The best thing that came out of the religions was the music, because they're always busy concretizing their knowledge, and then anybody else who has anything, it's unacceptable.
Right.
And then I get, accused, well, but you can't have a free-for-all. Well, but you also can't negate looking at sacred truth if it's truth. And I can tell you, in my opinion, I think there's a lot of truth in the ancient Kabbalistic, as well as, and I'm talking the very ancient stuff, pre-religion. And I'm talking very long time ago. I don't want to cite documents here, but particularly the Vedantic stuff too. It's profound, and it talks about how to get out of fate, how to get out of the influence of the planets. And the problem is, most of it, this is why the Tibetan lamas would take people up into the hills, or the yogis of India and the Kabbalists out in the desert, is because if you're interacting with the ego of other humans, you tend to get into anger, and all these emotions, and that creates what they call thought form elementals, which permeate your aura, which then react on you karmically, and they seem to carry us lifetime after lifetime after lifetime. I
like that. That's a good way of expressing that emotional. How do you say emotional elementals, or?
They're called thought form elementals. One of the guys that I like a lot, and I have great respect for, he's now out of the body, or dead as we would call it. His name was referred to as Daskalos. He was also known by some as the Magus of Strovolos. One of my favorite books to recommend to people, because that particular book, this man had ascended masters that were working with him, and he just died not very long ago, right around 2000. I mean, medically, he could heal people. I mean, and I'm not demeaning John of God, because John of God's wonderful. A friend of mine went down and saw him, and he's doing some great work. But this guy literally could reconstruct bones, take demons and bring them into the light. He could absorb people's karmic elementals and dissipate them on the astral plane or through the physical plane. I mean, doctors would look at x-rays, they would look at CAT scans, people with gangrene, crushed spine, he'd heal them instantly. And it's just not my opinion, it's a matter of scientific fact. And yet he's not canonized or sainted or anything else, because he wanted nothing to do with the religions.
Right.
In fact, he didn't even want fame. He didn't want anybody to know about him. And yet he became world famous. In fact, you guys were mentioning the place earlier. He lived in Cyprus, right in a town called Strovolos. That's why he was called the Magus of Strovolos. It's a suburb of Nicosia. And that island is fascinating because the Knights Templar were there. There's a lot of secret history there. A lot of Egyptian stuff came through there. It's a very interesting place, Cyprus, and it's interesting how the bankers are now using it for almost a model of what they can do. But fascinating guy, and he talks about how the elementals we create, literally our thoughts. In fact, the Vedantic scriptures say the same thing. They call them samskaras. A samskara is a thought form elemental. And what's interesting, and people who screw around with various different disciplines will know that, and I'm referring here to some magical practices, which I don't really favor at all, unless it's for healing. In fact, I think it's dangerous. But the point is that he teaches that, and so does the Vedantic scriptures, as well as the Tibetan Lamas do, that the more intense and emotional you are about something, you will create a thought form elemental of corresponding etheric energy on the astral plane. And the advanced ones know how to do it with psychic, noetic, and etheric different vibrations of it. In fact, Dr. Emoto, who I think has given us the best scientific proof we've ever seen over in Japan, where he's had the frozen water samples where various people would pray or meditate, and he's got thousands of examples, and he'd freeze the water, concretizing the energy, and then photograph it. And he's done the same thing with worry, fear, anger, and all the different emotions. And that proves, in my opinion, the etheric vibration of thought forms, which appear to come out of the third eye chakra.
Right. Yeah. We actually had him on the show a couple of years ago, and it was a fascinating interview. But we pulled another experiment of his that he has in his website and did it ourselves. It calls it the rice experiment, where you take 3 equal parts of rice and water and put them in 3 containers, and basically you do the same thing. You project love into every day. You project love into it. The second container you project hate into, and you just ignore the third one and just watch the results of the decay of the rice. And it's a very repeatable and very easy experiment that people can do for themselves, right on their kitchen windowsill, and it will definitely show the effects of love on matter. I mean, the effects of your own being on the environment. So
this is the most fascinating stuff to me, and to me, that's what I really focus on when one of the reasons I like doing this work, and I feel very blessed and honored to do it, is that it allows me to help someone to see where they're at. It's like a good airline pilot. What do they do when you take off from the airport? They study what's in their path. It's not superstitious to look at a radar or to listen to the weather report in the control tower and say, well, what do we got here? And I'm amazed at some of the new airlines because the new airline pilot, the radar, or I should say the efficiency that the airlines have. We just flew recently, and the airline pilot said, well, folks, we're not going to serve the coffee here for about another 15 minutes because in about 7 minutes we got turbulence coming. And I thought, okay, see if he's right. So I look, and he's right on. 7 minutes, boom, bang, boom, we're bouncing all over the place. And he says, well, this is a little rougher than we expected, but we're going to take it up and get out of this, and be a few minutes, it'll be over with, and we'll have you back to your food and beverage services. And sure enough, right on. Now, was that superstitious? I don't think so. I think it was very wise that we didn't have hot coffee bouncing all over the cabin and old ladies, bouncing, hurting themselves on seats and falling down and breaking shoulders, right? So, again, that's what I really have a problem with is I have had some people, oh, this is superstition, work of the devil. No, it's not. Maybe what you've been taught was. It's because if you use it for good and helping people, there's nothing wrong with it. You're trying to help somebody. You know, I've had mothers with children who said, you know, why is my poor kid doing this? Well, we look at the chart and, well, the poor kid's got this or this, and now all of a sudden, well, geez, that's right when this started. Right, but here's where it's going to end. So what do? You know, instead of being hard on the kid and saying, get your head together, you support them and give them the kindness and understanding that they need commensurate with the energy they're experiencing.
Right.
Like, for instance, I've seen people have nasty emotional aspects. If you study astrology, you know it's very specific. Like if you have a Saturn conjunct Moon, people get depressed and they get lethargic, or whatever it is. It's very specific. And I had one CEO of a company once come in here and say, it's been really rough. I'm now on medications and my employees and blah, 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 blah. And I said, well, when did this start? Oh, it's right about here. I said, well, look, this is exactly when you had this very nasty aspect. And I said, I'm not going to sugarcoat this. It's going to get worse until right about, or not worse, I said more intense until right about here. And then it's going to end. Really? It's going to end in 3 or 4 months? Threw the pills in the garbage can and said, well, as long as I know it's not me and that it's an energy that I'm experiencing, I can deal with this. Right. And then I get the email 6 months later, and see, that's it. She found out it wasn't her. It was an energy she was experiencing. Because we always identify with us. We think it's us.
I love that airplane metaphor. That's excellent. That's a very good description of what astrology does for you.
Yeah, if you got a crap storm coming and well, put your helmet on.
Exactly.
When it's over.
So we're wow, this first hour just blew by. We're almost at the top of the hour, Jeff. Are you doing workshops, or you're still reading for people, et cetera, if you would like to get your information out there?
Yeah, I do a lot of readings. I also have a lot of clients that hire me on a retainer basis, where I do elections for them, where they're doing business things or questions. I do everything from restaurant openings to fashion companies to entertainment deals. A lot of contract signing, stuff like that. And so I'm always busy. But I love workshops. Workshops are fun. I just the last one I did was over in California at the retreat center in Joshua Tree, which was a lot of fun. Really, some great people. And it was basically about consciousness, about how to get more conscious self-awareness using these tools.
So, your website is www.jeffharman.com. And
these days you don't even need W's. You just type in jeffharman.com.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
It's Harman.
Yeah, is that a different Harman? Because I saw Jeff Harman, HARMON.
No, it's JEFFHARMAN.com.
No, I'm saying, is that a different person? Because I kept finding out.
I don't know. I don't know who that is. All I know is jeffharman.com is my website, and it's got a link there to emails too. It's my email's jeff@jeffharman.com.
There we go. All right, guys. Well, we're gonna get into a little bit of what we've got coming down the road here, and maybe look at how some of the stars bounces around here in the last 6 months since the 2012 date, and look into our future a little bit in the next segment. So
and I also want to look at the number 13 too.
Yes, absolutely. All right, well, guys, we will see you in the members section, and if you're not a member, I would urge you to hit that button and have access to all that second hour content. Condemnation without investigation is the height of ignorance.
The love you deny is the pain you carry.
And told us to be the change we wish to see in the world. Freedom's calling, I feel the fire that's deep inside us. Everybody wants change, but tell me who will guide us. To the leaders that pass away, put up your lighters. It's a beautiful struggle, but it cannot divide us. We're the ones that we've always been waiting for. See yourself in the mirror and open up the door. Walk through it and feel the love throughout your pores. Be the light, life's purpose is to feel joy. Metaphysical, lyrical, standing up for truth. The only one to make change is walking in your shoes. Be the example, don't complain about the news. Making music and serving the world with the loo. Now you can be the same, or you can be the change. Find strength from inside, break through the chains. No one to blame, nothing to prove. You create your reality, it's up to you. Be the change
that you wanna see in the world. Like Gandhi, live for peace,
aspire to be.
Someone who fights for the beliefs like Martin Luther King.
Aspire to be
that love,
that light,
like Christ,
life
for the moment in need.
And if you believe
in Jehovah, Allah, Buddha,
Krishna,
it's love to me.
My soul yearns for peace in a world that's flooded with war. History's littered with body scar, trying to settle the score and maintain an archaic platform of power and greed. People fight for land out of survival and need. So I'm killing my television and I'm planting a seed to fill my head with knowledge that I'm seeing receive. Due to the media propaganda, killing my creed. Or what don't kill me make me stronger, feeling straight when I bleed. Fighting for interest and forwards attached to feet. They try to say you anything in this world, nothing for free. Land, air, fire, and water, they keep up in the ante while the anti-proletariat told the powers to be. But we keep fighting, surviving and thriving, recycling and rhyming. We constantly inclining, we see through the lying and prying. They tactically keep trying to keep you from asking the why.
Be the change that you wanna see in the world. Like Gandhi, live for peace,
aspire to be.
Someone who fights for the beliefs like Martin Luther King.
Aspire to be
that love,
that light,
like Christ,
life
for the moment in need.
And if you believe
in Jehovah,
Allah,
Buddha,
Krishna,
it's love to me.
We find solutions, different possibilities, creating organizations like Aspire to Be, inspiring young minds to see, building life skills, nurturing creativity, fulfilling the youth's basic needs, listening actively, teaching the tools to succeed, positive role models, we plant the seed, the roots drink the water which feed the trees, someone help me, giving back is my responsibility.
Be the change that you wanna see in the world. Like Gandhi, live for peace,
aspire to be.
Someone who fights for the beliefs like